So, why did you decide to become a scientist? Because I hated science at school. It was so boring. Like, you know, it was all just learn this equation, memorize this fact, and I didn't care.
At the university where I did my degree, they had it was either with fish like sticklebacks or chicken or grasshoppers, and that really didn't appeal to me much because I really wanted to be wanted to work with big, wild, ferocious animals.
I got very disenchanted with science, and partly I came to the conclusion that all that science does is serve capitalism, and you know, that we'd never really get a better world through science unless, you know, I thought the real problems of the world are political.
Yeah.
But then I sort of bumbled back into the lab and did a PhD, and I just found I was happy in the lab. And I
really got interested in science was when I was in 3rd grade, so I must have been around 7 years old. So I remember it was the first time that we learned about cells and how we were multicellular organisms. So we were our body was made up of millions of cells. So I thought that was really cool. And it said something in the book about how the dot at the end of the sentence that we were reading, it had around 30 cells, so to give you an idea. So I just thought, wow, it must be made of so many cells. So I remember going home, and I was so excited because I had to tell my parents about this, because clearly if they hadn't told me, I didn't know anything about this. They didn't know either. And it turns out, when I told them, they weren't as excited because they already knew. But that moment on, I would go home and want to talk about what I learned in science class. And that really didn't happen in other classes.
For me, it was kind of obvious. Since I was very young, I was always curious about understanding everything. So naturally, I was very impressed by life. All what was moving. I guess all little kids are impressed by that. They catch animals and play with them.
Yeah.
And so I actually thought about becoming a veterinarian.
Ah, okay.
But it turned out that it was too much of a routine work, and I found out that research was really what was exciting me. And so that's how I ended up doing science.
When I was about 13, my dad gave me a book called Junk Food Monkeys by a guy called Robert Sapolsky. And Robert Sapolsky is a neuroscientist at Stanford, but the book wasn't about neuroscience, it was just about science in general. It was about whatever caught his fancy, seen through a prism of science, essentially. So, for example, one of the essays was about epilepsy and how people used to think that people with epilepsy were actually haunted by demons. And then they discovered the neurological basis of the condition and how to treat it, and suddenly these people weren't crazy monsters to be locked up, they were just people. And I just thought it was fascinating, like understanding how so much of our beliefs and everything can be explained or understood through the prism of science.
Why I became a scientist in the first place? Well, like pretty much everyone would say, is you go through school and it's something that you prefer among the disciplines you're kind of learning. But I think the real reason now as an adult I do it as a job is probably because you do have some degree of freedom that maybe you won't have in other jobs. It's probably that I think it's the most appealing, not just freedom in terms of time that you work, but also the freedom in creativity. You kind of can do pretty much every day something new, something that you can be probably the only person actually doing in the whole world. So that's kind of enthusiastic and new, and every day is kind of a new day. So
it's a bit like living on a ship that's going up a gigantic river that's never been navigated before, you know. So waking up in the morning, it's a bit like waking up on a ship and thinking, let's go out on deck and see where we are now, you know, and see things that no other human eyes have seen. I mean, in a way, that's what it's like to be a scientist, because this gigantic river is the river of all of the things that we haven't discovered, which, you know, has in its knowledge that has the power to completely transform the world and to transform what it is to be a human.
I enjoy the work as a scientist. You have there's a lot of variation. You don't always do the same thing. You can. So I started as a protein biochemist. Now I work in a aging genetics lab. So I came a long way really, but I learned a lot. I picked up a lot of skills on the way, and I met a lot of really interesting and lovely people as well.
You know, it's a wonderful form of work. It's wonderful. I mean, you work with a team of people, discovering things that have never been known before. I mean, it's an incredible thing to do.